You're watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.
Welcome on into Toronto Sports Rush. I'm Julie Stewart-Binks, and it is McGuire Mondays featuring Pierre McGuire. We are reunited to discuss the Toronto Maple Leafs and the state of Leafs Nation. As we know, Pierre, they're coming off of a 4-3 overtime loss against the Seattle Kraken. But the big news is enough, which is what goaltender Anthony Stolarz said after their loss. Based on a couple of different instances that happened in that game, we can look to Mason Marchment going into him and nobody really doing anything about it. Brandon Carlo in front of the net kind of sort of pushing Jaden Schwartz, and we'll discuss all that. But I really want to ask you, your goaltender comes out after a loss and calls out your team, not only just in front of what was going on in front of their net, but also he does discuss how the team could be better overall in the last 6 games. What do you make about what he said?
I like the fire. I like the passion. I like the call for urgency early in the year. You know, he's got some street cred. He's a Stanley Cup champion, even though he wasn't the goalie of record. But I like the fact that he was part of a group that did win the Stanley Cup. He understands the work that goes into winning. You think about the disappointments that the Toronto Maple Leafs and their fans have experienced since 1967. I think he wants to right a lot of the wrongs early in the year. If he has to be the guy that's the pusher or the one that makes it change, then I like it. And he'll back it up because he's a worker and he's a tough kid. He's from Edison, New Jersey. He's a tough kid. He's been kicked in the teeth a lot in his career, whether it was in college at Nebraska, Omaha, junior with the London Knights. Look at all the different NHL teams he's been on. It has not been an easy ride. And he just signed like a contract extension, and I think he gave the team a little bit of a hometown discount. He signed because he wants to win in Toronto, and he doesn't want anybody taking shortcuts. So I had no problem with it.
I think you make some great points there that I'm sure many Leafs fans would have hoped that they had heard during the Sheldon Keefe era, which was people taking accountability early on in the season, not making excuses, and kind of really trying to figure things out when the issues start. And so let's take a look at like what actually happened and what he actually wants. We saw that perhaps maybe the Leafs don't necessarily have that axe murderer gene, that edge, because they weren't able to protect him when Marchment went into him. They didn't innately have that response of kind of going. If you go after a goalie, the rest of the team, it's just sort of like an unsung record, like it's just what happens. You go and you know, put your arm around a guy or something like that. But like, what does it tangibly look like when Anthony Stolarz calls out his team, especially the guys in front of him needing to be better? What do you want to see?
I want to see them play against the New Jersey Devils with a little burr under their bonnet. I want them to be angry, but controlled anger, smart anger, passionate, focused hockey. I want the defense to do a better job surrounding him and protecting him. I want the forwards to make sure they back check with a presence and with focus. And I think the biggest thing is, you know, hard little plays, hard on the boards, hard in the slot, hard on faceoff, support your center iceman, all these little fundamental things that everybody talks about. And I do think part of the reason why the Leafs have had this kind of pedestrian start for their caliber of player is because they have kind of let some things slip. And I don't think Craig Berube has to be the bad guy all the time. Sometimes the internal pressure, peer pressure from eyeball to eyeball in the dressing room, from player to player, that means a lot, especially if it's coming from a guy that's a pretty respected person in that organization. So, again, I think it's a great early call. And part of what's really good about it, think about the time of the year that it happens. The Blue Jays in baseball, the start of the NBA season, football playoffs in the CFL, all these different things going on at one time. So he's able to do it. It does bring a little attention to the team. But if he had done it, let's say in December or January, I think it gets more headlines. Right now, I think it's just an internal thing. So I kind of like what he did. I think it's a pretty smart act, actually.
Right. And it feels very authentic because it's not just necessarily about in front of him, but he does talk about at the other end of the ice. Maybe we could take a page out of their book. He references the Seattle Kraken because he said they were lofting softballs basically at Joey Daccord in the game, so making it easy for him. You mentioned the Blue Jays. It is an interesting time right now. We know as we are recording this on Monday morning that the Jays this evening will be playing in a Game 7, and we will have to see what happens. They were able to win Game 6 against Seattle. Ironic that they were also playing them in hockey, which I guess goes back. I was looking at a stat, 1993, they played Chicago, the Leafs, and then the Jays also then played Chicago, but it was a little bit of a different story. So when you look at this, how do you think the Leafs feel right now? Like, what's the impact or the effect of this Blue Jays team and sort of the excitement, the exhilaration, seeing Vlad Guerrero Jr. just really being such a mascot for this team and showing that fire and excitement in the clubhouse? What kind of effect do you think it has on the Leafs?
A lot. I think a player like John Tavares or a player like Austin Matthews or a player, let's say, like Jake McCabe or Chris Tanev, they see that. They're veteran players, and they're like, wow, what about us? Could you imagine what it would be like if that was us? And so I think it does play a role. I know that Johnny T went to one of the games with Austin. They were sitting in a box, and Tavares, I read his comments afterwards saying, this is unbelievable. Well, think about what it would be like if the Leafs ever got into the Eastern Conference Final. Forget just getting to the Stanley Cup Final. Get to the Eastern Conference Final. Haven't done that in a real long time since Pat Quinn, the late Pat Quinn, was coaching, and they lost to Carolina. So, I think it plays a role, Julie. I really do, and I think it's an important role because it brings momentum to the franchise, brings momentum to the city. I think it's great when people do that. There's internal competition in every city. Everybody's battling for those disposable dollars. Well, the Leafs and the Blue Jays right now are the two hot things in Toronto. So it's great for the Leafs, I think.
Yeah, I think it's perfectly said right there. I mean, it kind of lights a bit of a fire under them because they've always been the number one ticket in town. And when you have this other team that has really captured so many people's hearts, like the energy, the vibes are just completely different, right? Because also it's much more of an accessible game, not necessarily in the playoffs, but to go and watch and to go and see, and seeing even just Vlad sort of being, he's got great energy even when it's, in the first inning, it's, 0-0 or something like that. He's got the vibe that they're up like 10-0 or something like that. It's not the way that we saw the Leafs maybe in the playoffs for many years where it's this kind of like, we're scared, doom and gloom, like what bad thing is going to happen. It always felt like this just sort of feels like it's writing a different narrative in a way from what the Leafs have had as their narrative. Would you say that? We feel like it feels like it's maybe showing Toronto, hey, you can go to a Game 7 and maybe feel good about it.
Yeah, no, I do. I think it's creating a real good storyline for the Leafs and for the Blue Jays. This is a huge week for the Leafs. And I don't want to say this is the week they got to win, but it's a big week. When you think about it, you got Jersey coming in, who's won 5 in a row after losing their first game. They've won 5 in a row. Then you go to Buffalo. Then you're back on Saturday to play Buffalo. So you got 6 points potentially in the bank if you take care of business. I think that was part of what Anthony Stolarz was trying to do too. Let's stop looking past teams. When we get a chance on a Saturday night at a home game in our building on Hockey Night in Canada, let's not let our foot off the gas pedal. And we see the Blue Jays. I love what you said about Vlad Guerrero Jr. because it's true. The enthusiasm's there, and the players feed off that, and the fans feed off that. I think Stolarz is trying to get the players to start to buy into that a little bit. I think as a goalie who's been around, he knows this is a big week. Nobody's talking about it because everybody's focusing on the Blue Jays. But you got a real good New Jersey Devil team coming in with your old coach coaching it. Then you got Buffalo. Those traditional Friday night games in Buffalo are always hard because everybody's a little bit lubricated when they go to the game. When I was coaching, they used to start at 8 o'clock. Now they got wise. They started at 7:30 instead. But there's still a little lubrication going on before the game starts. You got a pretty passionate fan base. And then Saturday night, it's that back-to-back home and home with Buffalo. This is a big week. I'm just telling you, this is a huge week for them. If they put 6 points in the bank, they're going to start to cruise. You watch. Because the next game they have coming in is Calgary. And they should be taking care of business against Calgary. But just take care of this week first. I think that's what Stolarz was trying to do.
Right. You said the Devils game against Sheldon Keefe that they have on Tuesday night. We'll have to see what kind of response that they have based on what Anthony Stolarz said. And then Craig Berube came out and echoed the sentiments, like literally saying enough is enough as well. Yeah. So you have him backing up his goalie. and you're saying, okay, it's been the start of the season. It's only 6 games into the season, but based on how things are going, the way when you break down the games, we know that it's a team without Mitch Marner. Of course, that's the narrative, at least heading into this season. But then there just seems to be a little bit of inconsistency overall. We've seen a lot of line juggling, a lot of different combinations here and there. When you look at this team, what is your analysis of sort of what's working and what isn't?
First of all, Scott Laughton's injury in preseason has hurt this lineup so far. And I know people in Toronto are like, wait a second, he's a third or fourth line player. It affects your depth down the middle. I thought that was one of the strengths of the team going into the season when Laughton would be playing. They'd have this organizational depth at center, which would be really important for them. Well, obviously, losing him forces Domi to play center rather than wing. Easton Cowan coming in the lineup looks really comfortable. They need him to continue to grow playing with Matthews and Nyes. I think that's really important. They're still trying to find a way for Matias Maccelli to really get involved with this group. I think he's getting more and more comfortable with Tavares and Nylander. We'll see how that plays out. But I want to see this team when they have Laughton back in the lineup. I want to see what this team can do with a consistent Bobby McMann. And I really think that Easton Cowan is going to have a heck of a season as a first-year pro in the National Hockey League. I really do. I really believe that based on what I've seen so far. So if everybody can get on board and then the defense can get a little bit better, that's great. Now, here's my downside. And I know you didn't want me to go there, but I have to go there.
Oh, I want you to go there. Yeah.
Julie, every morning I look at goal differential around the league, and I look at power play percentages and penalty kill percentages for every team in the league. And Scotty Bowman a long time ago created a thing called a special teams quotient. A special teams quotient is the addition of the percentage of your penalty kill and the addition of the percentage of your power play. And if you go look at since 2002, every team that's won the cup or played for it has a special teams quotient of 105 or better, 105% or better. The Leafs right now are 82.4 on the penalty kill. That's not good enough. Needs to be better. And on the power play, they're 14.3. So their special teams quotient now is 96.7. So you're basically 9 percentage points below where you need to be. And I'm not a big numbers guy, but this is one that works. If you go look at it over time, it's one that definitely is transparent and it works. The positive, though, out of all this for the Leafs, they're 4.5, almost 5 percentage points above 50% when it comes to faceoffs. That's helping them. That's a big lead. That's around 8th in the league, I think 7th in the league, if I remember. But that special teams quotient has to get better. And that was my biggest concern. I know I spoke to you about it. I talked to Kyle about it. Not having Marner in the power play, they got to figure out how they're going to run their power play because he was a huge component on that power play.
Right. And you mentioned a variety of different things there that I want to go back into. And one of them is Easton Cowan. Saw him on the top line against the Rangers. He was then benched and he was brought down and sort of figuring things out. It looks as though he will eventually be a guy that will be able to shine in the spotlight. Like he seems to have that kind of DNA. But right now at this moment, I mean, do you feel as though maybe he might benefit more by having more minutes in the American Hockey League?
I just spent the weekend watching so many American Hockey League games, and I saw Florida's farm team. I was telling producer Tim before I came out, I saw Florida's farm team play 2 games this weekend live in Charlotte. They probably have 8 guys on that team right now that could play in the National Hockey League. I'm not kidding. Now, they went to the final. They lost to Abbotsford in an unbelievably hard-fought series. They're really good. So I'm watching those games. It was against Minnesota's farm team, Iowa Wild. And what stood out to me was the pace of the games, the physicality without the fighting, and the goaltending, especially from Cooper Black of Florida's farm team. And I was saying, there's not much difference between him and Anthony Stolarz. I'm watching this kid's 6'8", and he's really so. You're bringing up the American Hockey League. Most of these teams now are so good. The games are so good. There's not a big difference. So it wouldn't hurt them probably, but I think the Leafs are going to keep him up. I think they're going to keep him up.
Does he fit on that top line?
That's See, I think Michelli's a better fit there, but I think what they're trying to do is get diversified offense. So I think what they're trying to do is get Nylander, Tavares, and Michelli going. And they probably think that somebody can fill in on that right. Maybe eventually it'd be Domi when they get Lawton back. I think Lawton's a big part of this puzzle. I really do.
For you, I know, as you mentioned, and he came in, he hasn't had a full season yet, right? Because he has the ability to be someone that this team can rely on. Now, some of the other lineup questions, like a Nick Waugh, for example. I mean, what do you make of how he's been so far and how he's been used? Because I believe he's centering that fourth line at this point, and that's not what you probably expected.
I thought he'd be third or fourth line center. I did. I didn't think he was going to play above that. That's where he fit really well in Vegas. I expect him to be more of a face-off guy, defend the league late in the game, be more physical on the forecheck. Julie, I think he's okay right now. I didn't like the penalty the other night. I know, they score on a power play goal, but I think the one thing about Nick is it's hard when you get traded to find that physical identity because you're trying to see exactly what the coach wants from you. And you don't want to make any mistakes. So I think eventually I'd give it another 7 to 10 games and see where he is, but I wouldn't be worried about him. He's a guy that's going to be okay, I believe.
Okay, so another player I have a question about is the fact that one guy has scored 3 goals, even strength, to start the season, and he was scratched on Saturday night, and that was Calle Jarnkrok. Yep. Why do you think Craig Berube went in this direction, and do you think it was the right one?
Yeah, I think it was the right one. He knows his lineup better than I know his lineup because he's with those guys every day at practice. So he sees who's surging, who's flatlining, who's dropping. Calle's a good player. He's a way undervalued skill player. He'll get back in the lineup, I believe. But I think he's trying to figure out. He wants to get a quote-unquote identity line. I think that's coming with Lorentz, with Waugh, and Joshua. But it's not there yet. You correctly asked, Julie, about Nick Waugh, and I agree with you. He's still not where he needs to be, but I can see what Berube's trying to do. He's trying to create this identity line that's going to create a lot of havoc on the forecheck and be physical. So I see what he's doing. Callie's not that kind of player. I think Calle needs to play up higher in the lineup. Eventually, I think he will. It's interesting you bring his name up because everybody's talking about the potential of a trade again for Nick Robertson. His name is out there. There's no question his name is out there. So if you trade him, who's going in his spot? I got to think it's Calle Jarnkrok. And if it's not Calle Jarnkrok, it's Easton Callan.
Well, yeah, Nick Robertson's name has definitely been one circling for many years, and especially, as you said, come back into the conversation this year. The physicality we talk about, the kind of having that bit more of an edge. This wasn't necessarily a problem for the Leafs last year. They're very good at shutting teams down, a lot of team defense to start the year, a lot of how Craig Berube wanted to play, but it feels as though that is inconsistent this year, as we see from Anthony Stolarz talking about the team, Berube seeing guys not sort of protect Easton Cowan when he had, a bit of a scuffle, like I don't know what we'll say, hit with in the Rangers game, but like a lot of these different things going on. How do you? It's not like a light switch. You can't really just flip on being more difficult to play against. How do you sort of maybe tangibly instill this type of identity now with this group of players, which is different from last year?
I think Anthony Stolarz took a big first step by what he said after the game on Saturday. That's part of it. Players policing the room matters. Eyeball to eyeball confrontation matters. He's not going to shy away from anybody. So he's going to hold guys accountable. Just like I think a guy like Jake McCabe's going to hold guys. I've seen Jake forever, whether he was at the University of Wisconsin or he's captain of Team USA winning a World Junior in Russia. He's a leader. He's a tremendously intense person. He doesn't want to lose. He wants to win, and I'd say the same thing about Christopher Tanev. So I look at, there's a lot of hard, metal, tough guys there. I think they're trying to get everybody to buy in, and it hasn't worked all the time, but I think it's about to start to work. I do.
Okay, so that from that mentality side, I totally agree with you on that. But then on the ice, and let's even also Brandon Carlo as well, we'll put into the fact that maybe someone that needs to be a little bit harder in front of the net. But what does it look like that Berube would want to see on the ice that that isn't what he said, taking guys' heads off, but really does show and a physical presence, and it actually works and it toes the line, so you're not also getting in trouble penalty-wise.
There's a great sequence in the New Jersey Devil Edmonton Oilers game the other day where Connor Brown, the former Leaf, former Ottawa Center, former Edmonton Oilers, a lot of formers for Connor, goes in and scores a shorthanded goal. And if you watch that replay, and I ask everybody if they can, go watch it. It's on YouTube. Luke Glendening, this is the kind of play, to answer your question. Luke Glendening wins a one-on-one battle against Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. So Glendening's killing the penalty, and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins on the power play. He wins it. Physical battle, stick battle, intensity with your feet battle, in open ice. He wins the battle, moves the puck up. Connor Brown goes in on a breakaway, shorthanded, and scores. And eventually creates a separation point where New Jersey beats Edmonton. That's what Craig Berube wants to see. Guys winning battles all over the ice, whether it's deep in your own zone, whether it's in the slot, whether it's in the neutral zone, whether it's in open ice, whether it's on the forecheck, whether it's in the other team's slot area. The great Daryl Sutter had 3 rules, and they were good. Win the slot battles in your end, win the slot battles in their end, win the board battles, you win the game. He coached his team to win 3 different areas of battle. The slot in your zone, the slot in their zone, and all the board battles. You win those 3, you win the game. That's what Craig Berube wants. I would take that. I'm telling you right now, they may have already done it. I don't know. But I was watching that play and I'm going, if I were still coaching, that would be showed to my team. This is how you play.
Right. And it keeps it simple for guys too. Figure out these 3 things, win these, and the rest of it will come, especially being able to have control of the puck and being able to obviously score in those different situations. So to wrap things up, they have the Devils on Tuesday night. And then, as you said, a home with Buffalo. And then as well, Calgary coming into Toronto, right? That's it. On side. Okay.
Yep.
So out of these games, what would be in your mind a way that we would say, okay, things are starting to trend upward? 2 things you'd see that from the team, and then maybe 2 things you would see if you were like, well, I don't think they really got the message.
Well, if I'm seeing an improved power play, and I'm seeing a power play that's got a precision point to it, which I'm sure Mark Savard wants, whether it's Austin Matthews, it doesn't matter, Johnny Tavares. There's got to be a rhyme and rhythm to how you play in a power play. So I want to see that. It can't be at 15%. Like, you got to get that power play over 24%. And it's got to start this week. So I want to see that. I want to see guys winning races to get loose pucks. I want to see guys establishing inside presence on the back check. And I want to see guys, and this is not a knock on Willie Nylander. It's too easy to knock him for what happened on the Mahura goal. It's way too easy. That can't happen. And he knows it. I'll tell you one thing right now. If there's one guy that's going to play guilty on Tuesday night against New Jersey, it's going to be Willie Nylander. You watch. He's going to bring a big game for that game because he knows he let his teammates down. And whether you want to name him or not, he's a pro. He'll take it, and he'll go and try to prove you wrong. But I want to see an improved power play. I want to see guys winning races. I want to see guys establishing inside position on the back check. And I want to see guys putting guys into the boards without taking penalties.
Right. And as we said, it's early in the season, but you just don't want some of these tendencies to become habits that end up being part of your identity down the stretch. We'll have to see how the Toronto Maple Leafs fare as they take on the Devils on Tuesday night, whether they will be inspired by their counterparts down the street with the Toronto Blue Jays, or that we know that they already are, but we'll have to see how the Toronto sports scene fares in the next few days. Thank you so much, Pierre, for joining us on McGuire Mondays, and everyone, thank you for joining us, watching us here on Toronto Sports Rush. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.